Hello, Capricorn, and welcome back. I'm really glad you're here today. Before we begin, just allow yourself a quiet moment. Take a slow breath, let the outside world soften for a little while, and simply stay open to whatever resonates with your own journey. Not every message is meant for everyone, and that's perfectly okay. Trust your intuition. It usually knows where your heart is being gently guided long before your mind catches up. The energy surrounding your reading feels incredibly quiet, but not empty. It's the kind of silence that carries emotion beneath the surface. I keep feeling someone who has been trying to appear composed, someone who continues moving through their daily life as though everything is perfectly fine. But honestly, Capricorn, it feels like they're carrying you with them far more often than anyone realizes. The first card that immediately catches my attention is the Four of Pentacles. It's almost as if this person has been holding on to something they refuse to release. Maybe they've tried convincing themselves that enough time has passed. Maybe they've believed distance would eventually weaken these feelings. Yet every attempt to move forward seems to bring them right back to the same place. Back to thoughts of you. Then the Six of Cups gently steps into the reading, and everything suddenly becomes softer. I keep seeing memories returning without invitation, a familiar smile, a conversation they thought they had forgotten, the comfort they once felt simply by being around you. It feels like these memories arrived during ordinary moments, while driving home, making coffee, or sitting quietly at the end of a long day. They may never admit it aloud, but something about your energy continues to live inside them. Yeah, I also noticed the Page of Swords appearing here, and this energy feels incredibly observant. It seems like they're still curious about your life, whether that's through social media, mutual friends, or simply wondering how you've been. There is this quiet desire to know if you're happy, if you've changed, or if someone else has stepped into the place they once occupied. They're watching from a respectful distance, yet their attention keeps drifting back toward you more often than they expected. What surprises me the most is the Hermit. It doesn't feel like isolation because they stopped caring. Quite the opposite. It feels like someone who withdrew because they needed to understand themselves. They're questioning old choices, replaying conversations, and looking at everything through a completely different perspective now. I keep hearing this quiet realization forming inside them. Perhaps walking away never solved anything. Perhaps silence only made the connection feel louder. Oh my God! That's the interesting part. The longer this distance lasts, the more obvious your value becomes in their heart. There seems to be an awareness growing slowly, almost reluctantly. They may have believed they could simply lock these emotions away and focus on responsibilities, work, or everyday routines. But every road somehow circles back to you. Every distraction eventually fades, leaving them alone with thoughts they've been trying not to face. For many of you, this doesn't necessarily mean someone is ready to appear at your door tomorrow. The energy simply suggests they're reaching a point where avoiding these feelings no longer brings peace. They're beginning to understand that missing you and pretending not to miss you are two completely different experiences. One heals, the other quietly lingers. Capricorn, your energy throughout this reading feels remarkably steady. You've continued building your own life, even if it hasn't always been easy, and perhaps that's exactly what has made such a deep impression on this person. They can feel that you've grown stronger, calmer, and more centered within yourself. Sometimes, the greatest transformation isn't something we announce. It's something other people suddenly notice when they realize we're no longer waiting in the same place they left us. I have a feeling this story is only beginning to unfold. Because as these emotions continue rising to the surface, another layer of this connection is preparing to reveal itself. And what comes next feels much deeper than simple memories alone. Something shifts the deeper I sit with this energy. It feels less like someone simply remembering the connection, and much more like someone finally allowing themselves to see it for what it has always been. The Judgment card comes forward so quietly, yet its presence feels impossible to ignore. It's almost as though life has been placing little moments in front of this person, moments they can no longer explain away. Certain memories suddenly make sense. Certain conversations sound different in their mind than they did before. It's like they're hearing your words again, only this time with a completely different heart. Yeah, I keep feeling this realization arriving gradually instead of all at once. They may have spent a long time believing they could organize every emotion, file everything neatly into a logical explanation, and simply move on. But feelings rarely follow rules, do they? Sometimes they wait patiently until we're finally willing to listen. That's exactly what this energy reminds me of. The star appears, and something about it feels incredibly gentle. I don't see this person looking at you through the same lens they once did. It feels like admiration has quietly replaced certainty. They're beginning to appreciate the way you brought peace into situations that once felt chaotic. They remember how you encouraged them without trying to control them. They remember how you saw qualities within them that they often struggled to recognize themselves. Oh my God, there seems to be a quiet regret surrounding that realization. Not regret filled with panic, but the kind that arrives when someone finally understands the value of what stood in front of them all along. It feels like they're asking themselves difficult questions. Why did pride matter so much? Why was protecting their ego more important than protecting something that genuinely made their life brighter? Those answers don't seem easy for them to face, but the energy suggests they're no longer running from those questions. The Ace of Cups feels almost like a heart opening after being closed for far too long. I don't think this person is experiencing love as something exciting or dramatic anymore. Instead, it feels calmer, deeper, more mature. They're beginning to understand that what they truly wanted wasn't perfection. It was consistency, safety, someone they could grow beside without constantly feeling the need to defend themselves. And somehow, Capricorn, your energy continues to represent those things for them. It also feels like they're noticing details they overlooked before. Maybe your patience, your loyalty, the quiet way you continued showing kindness even during moments when you probably weren't receiving the same energy in return. Those memories seem to carry a different weight today. They no longer feel ordinary. They feel precious. Okay. The Hierophant brings an entirely different atmosphere into the reading. This isn't simply about emotion anymore. It feels like this person is beginning to imagine what commitment actually looks like. For someone who may have once avoided serious conversations or kept one foot outside the relationship, that shift feels surprisingly significant. They're starting to picture shared routines, shared responsibilities, and the comfort of building something lasting instead of constantly questioning where things might lead. There also seems to be an awareness growing inside them that perhaps the two of you crossed paths for a reason they didn't fully understand at the time. I'm not saying every connection is destined or guaranteed, but this one appears to have changed them in ways they never expected. Even if they tried to explain it logically, something deeper continues pulling at their attention, quietly reminding them that your presence left a lasting imprint. Capricorn, your energy doesn't feel like it's asking for validation anymore. That's part of what makes this reading feel so beautiful. While this person is slowly discovering truths within themselves, you've been creating your own sense of stability. Ironically, that steady energy may be exactly what allows them to see your importance with fresh eyes. I have a feeling another layer is preparing to unfold, because awareness often comes with its own challenges, and there are still fears hidden beneath the surface that this person has not completely faced yet. There is another layer beneath everything we've been feeling, and this part feels much quieter. It's not about whether the emotions exist anymore. It feels more like someone wrestling with everything those emotions demand from them. The moon steps into the reading, and almost immediately I sense uncertainty surrounding this person's inner world. They may appear confident to everyone around them, but inside, their thoughts seem to move in circles they can't quite escape. I keep feeling someone who has spent a long time trusting logic more than vulnerability. Whenever their heart tried to move toward you, their mind seemed to step in with another reason to hesitate. Questions became excuses. Doubts became delays. Instead of allowing themselves to discover where this connection could naturally lead, they seemed to convince themselves it was somehow safer not to know. Yeah, sometimes fear doesn't look dramatic. Sometimes it simply looks like silence. It looks like waiting another day before sending the message. It looks like convincing yourself the timing isn't right. It looks like pretending you're too busy while secretly hoping the other person won't walk away. That's the energy I keep sensing here. The Five of Swords carries a heaviness that feels deeply personal. It seems this person may have believed they needed to protect themselves at all costs. Whether that meant pulling away, creating emotional distance, or trying to appear unaffected, those choices may have felt reasonable in the moment. Yet the energy suggests those decisions never truly brought them peace. Instead, every attempt to stay emotionally protected seems to have created even more distance between what they wanted and what they actually experienced. Oh my God. I also feel something they rarely admit, even to themselves. There seems to be a quiet belief that they might not be enough, not successful enough, not emotionally ready enough, not healed enough. Whatever story they've carried about themselves, it feels like it slowly became the reason they questioned whether they deserved someone like you. Capricorn, your calm strength may have inspired them, but it may also have reflected back every insecurity they were still trying to hide. The Nine of Swords feels like those unanswered thoughts become louder whenever everything else grows quiet. I wouldn't be surprised if this person has replayed certain conversations more times than they could ever count. They may wonder whether they misunderstood your intentions, whether they waited too long, whether they hurt someone who genuinely wanted to understand them instead of changing them. Those questions don't seem to disappear very easily. There's also another feeling that keeps returning. It almost feels like concern about your future rather than their own. They seem to notice that your life isn't standing still. You're continuing to grow. You're investing your energy into yourself, your goals, your peace. And somewhere inside, they begin asking themselves, what happens if someone else recognizes everything they once overlooked? What if another person has the courage to offer what they couldn't? That possibility seems to touch something very deep within them. Okay, the Seven of Pentacles slows the entire reading down. I don't see someone giving up. I see someone standing still, wondering whether they waited so long that everything has already changed. They may have believed there would always be another opportunity, another conversation, another chance to explain themselves. But time has a gentle way of reminding us that every season eventually moves forward, whether we're ready or not. Capricorn, throughout all of this, your energy feels remarkably grounded. It doesn't feel like you're trying to convince anyone of your worth anymore. You've been learning to let life unfold without forcing every answer to arrive immediately. Ironically, that quiet confidence may be what this person notices most. They can sense the difference, even if they don't fully understand how much you've changed. It feels like something inside them is gradually reaching a point where remaining still becomes more uncomfortable than taking a risk. And that quiet realization may become the beginning of an entirely different chapter. Something feels noticeably different here, Capricorn. The energy is no longer standing still. It isn't rushing either, but it seems to be finding its natural rhythm after a long period of imbalance. The Justice card arrives with a quiet sense of honesty, almost like someone has reached a place where excuses no longer sound convincing, even to themselves. They're beginning to look back without trying to rewrite the past. Instead, they're asking what could have been done differently and, perhaps more importantly, what can still be made right. I keep feeling that your energy has shifted in ways this person didn't fully expect. There was probably a time when they believed you would always be the one reaching out first, always trying to understand, always leaving the door open. But something about you feels steadier now. You don't seem to be chasing answers anymore. You're simply allowing life to unfold at its own pace. Oddly enough, that quiet confidence seems to have captured this person's attention more than any words ever could. Yeah, respect keeps appearing throughout this reading, not because you've demanded it, but because you've shown it to yourself. The boundaries you've created don't feel like walls built from anger. They feel like peaceful reminders of your own worth. And the interesting thing is, this person appears to notice that difference. They may finally understand that love cannot continue growing where balance has been missing for too long. The Temperance card brings such a calming atmosphere. It feels like emotions that once pulled in opposite directions are beginning to settle. I don't sense someone trying to force a dramatic reunion or create an overwhelming emotional moment. Instead, it feels much gentler than that. They seem to be learning that meaningful connections often grow through patience, honesty, and consistency rather than urgency. That's a lesson they may not have fully understood before. Oh my God, the King of Cups carries so much unspoken emotion. This person may still struggle to express everything that's happening inside them, but their emotional world feels far more stable than it once did. They're no longer trying to convince themselves that these feelings will simply disappear. In fact, it seems they're beginning to recognize that vulnerability isn't weakness at all. For someone who spent so much time protecting their heart, even admitting that possibility feels like an enormous step forward. I also noticed something interesting. It feels like they're replaying moments where they misunderstood you, times when they reacted too quickly, times when silence replaced conversations that should have happened. There seems to be a genuine desire to approach those memories differently if another opportunity ever presents itself. Not because they expect everything to return to the way it was, but because they want their future choices to reflect the person they're becoming instead of the fears they used to carry. The Eight of Wands brings a subtle feeling of movement into the reading. It doesn't necessarily feel rushed, it simply feels like energy that has finally stopped resisting itself. Thoughts that remained trapped for so long seem to be searching for a voice. Conversations that were postponed again and again may no longer feel impossible. There appears to be an inner readiness growing, one that gently encourages action instead of hesitation. Okay. I also feel this person recognizing that relationships aren't built through assumptions. They're built through communication, mutual effort, and showing up consistently. Those realizations seem small on the surface, but they often become the foundation for much bigger changes later. It feels like they're beginning to understand that caring deeply about someone also means having the courage to let that person know. Capricorn, throughout all of this, your presence continues to feel remarkably grounded. You're not trying to pull anyone toward you. You're simply living in a way that reflects your own growth. Sometimes that's exactly what changes the energy between two people. Without saying very much at all, you've shown what self-respect, patience, and quiet strength truly look like. The cards leave me with the feeling that this story is gradually approaching a turning point. Because once someone begins seeing both themselves and the connection through clearer eyes, a choice quietly starts taking shape, and that choice may soon become impossible to keep hidden. The atmosphere feels very different here. There's a quiet certainty settling into the reading, and it doesn't feel like the certainty comes from knowing exactly how everything will unfold. It feels more like someone finally becoming honest with themselves. The Emperor stands firmly in front of me, and I keep sensing a person who is growing tired of letting fear make every important decision. For so long, they may have believed that staying guarded would keep them safe. But somewhere along the way, they began realizing that protecting themselves also meant keeping genuine happiness at a distance. Capricorn, this person seems to be looking at life through a different perspective now. They may still value control, stability, and careful planning, but something inside them has softened. They're beginning to understand that not every meaningful connection can be measured with logic alone. Some people enter our lives and quietly change the way we define home, trust, and belonging. It feels like your presence has done exactly that. Yeah, I keep hearing this inner conversation they seem to be having. It's almost as though they're asking themselves how much longer they're willing to watch life pass by without taking the chance that's been sitting in front of them all along. Sometimes the greatest risk isn't reaching out. Sometimes it's wondering years later what might have happened if you had simply been brave enough to try. The Knight of Cups carries such gentle movement. It doesn't feel dramatic or impulsive. Instead, it feels thoughtful, deliberate. Like someone who has spent enough time reflecting that every step forward now comes from sincerity instead of uncertainty. They may be imagining what it would feel like to sit across from you again, to have an honest conversation without defensiveness, without pride standing between the two of you. It seems they're beginning to understand that vulnerability isn't about losing control. It's about allowing another person to see who you truly are. Oh my God! One thing keeps standing out. This person doesn't seem interested in temporary moments anymore. Whatever once distracted them appears far less important now. Their attention feels centered on something much more meaningful. They're beginning to recognize that real connection isn't built through occasional words or inconsistent effort. It grows through presence, through showing up, through choosing someone again and again, especially when life becomes complicated. The Two of Cups brings an incredibly peaceful feeling into the reading. I don't see perfection here. I see mutual understanding becoming possible where confusion once existed. It feels like this person genuinely wants to meet you on equal ground. They may no longer want one person carrying all the emotional weight while the other remains uncertain. There's a quiet desire to build something that feels balanced, where both hearts have room to speak honestly without fear of being misunderstood. I also notice they're thinking differently about time itself. Instead of wondering whether the connection fits into their life, they're beginning to wonder how their life could grow alongside this connection. That's a subtle but meaningful change. It suggests they're no longer viewing love as something that interrupts their plans. It seems they're beginning to see love as something that could become part of the future they're trying to create. The Ten of Pentacles deepens that feeling even more. Stability keeps surrounding this energy. Shared mornings, familiar routines, quiet conversations after long days, supporting one another through victories and challenges alike. It doesn't feel like someone chasing excitement. It feels like someone discovering the beauty of consistency, loyalty, and building something that has room to last. Whether that future unfolds exactly this way isn't something any reading can promise, but the energy certainly seems to be moving toward a deeper appreciation for lasting commitment. Capricorn, throughout this journey, you've continued becoming someone who values peace as much as love. That's a powerful combination. Sometimes life brings us to a place where we stop asking whether someone will choose us, and instead begin asking whether the connection itself reflects the life we truly want to build. That quiet shift often changes everything. It feels like one final chapter still wants to reveal itself, because decisions become meaningful through the actions that follow. And the energy surrounding this connection seems ready to show what those actions may begin to look like. The energy feels incredibly peaceful here, Capricorn. It doesn't carry the weight of uncertainty the way it once did. Instead, it feels like the first light after a very long night, when everything is still quiet, yet something inside you knows a new day has already begun. The Empress appears with such warmth that I can't help but feel this connection is being viewed through completely different eyes. Whoever this person is, they seem to understand something they couldn't fully recognize before. They no longer see you as someone who simply crossed their path. It feels like they're beginning to realize how rare your presence truly is. Yeah, I keep sensing a deep appreciation growing inside them. Not because you've tried to convince them of your value, but because you've continued living your life with grace, strength, and quiet resilience. Sometimes people only recognize what made someone extraordinary after they've had enough time to reflect without all the distractions that once clouded their vision. It seems like that's exactly what's happening here. The Ace of Pentacles brings an energy that feels wonderfully grounded. Rather than chasing fleeting emotions, this person appears to be thinking about something much more tangible. They may be asking themselves how they can rebuild trust, how they can create consistency, and how they can become someone capable of offering real stability instead of uncertainty. I don't sense empty promises here. It feels more like someone understanding that meaningful relationships are built one honest step at a time. Oh my God. One thought continues returning as I sit with these cards. It feels like this person no longer wants old misunderstandings to define what happens next. If there are words that were never spoken, they seem to want those words to finally find their way into the open. If apologies have been sitting quietly inside their heart, it feels like they're becoming more willing to express them. Communication appears softer now, more genuine, less focused on defending themselves and more focused on understanding you. There also seems to be an openness that wasn't present before. Whether that means reaching out, suggesting a conversation, or simply allowing vulnerability to replace emotional distance, the energy suggests they're becoming much more comfortable with honesty. That doesn't necessarily mean everything happens overnight, but it does feel like they're no longer hiding behind the same walls that once kept this connection from growing. The Ten of Cups fills the reading with such a comforting atmosphere. I don't see perfection. I see two people who have learned important lessons through time, distance, and personal growth. It feels like this energy values emotional safety just as much as romantic love. There seems to be a quiet understanding that lasting happiness isn't created by never making mistakes. It's created by choosing kindness, respect, forgiveness, and mutual effort whenever life becomes complicated. Capricorn, your own energy feels beautifully balanced throughout all of this. You've continued becoming someone who understands that your worth doesn't depend on another person's timing or decisions. You've built something inside yourself that feels calm, secure, and deeply rooted. Ironically, that inner stability may be one of the very things drawing this person closer. When someone radiates peace instead of desperation, it naturally changes the way others experience them. The Wheel of Fortune gently closes this reading with an energy that feels hopeful rather than dramatic. Life has a way of bringing unexpected opportunities when people have grown through the lessons they once resisted. Whether this connection unfolds exactly as imagined is something no tarot reading can ever guarantee, but it certainly feels as though an important chapter is reaching its natural conclusion while another one quietly prepares to begin. The energy suggests movement, growth, and possibilities that may not have seemed available before. Okay, if this message found you at the right moment, take only what resonates with your own journey and leave behind whatever doesn't. Every path unfolds in its own perfect rhythm, and your intuition will always be your best guide through the chapters that are still being written. Capricorn, thank you so much for spending this time with me today. You truly mean more to this channel than you probably realize, and I hope these messages brought you a little clarity, a little comfort, and maybe even a little hope. Take good care of yourself, and I'll see you again in the next reading. Bye for now.